Oluchi learned to breathe in fragments. Before the sun even considered rising, she would tiptoe into the kitchen, a ghost in her own home, making tea in absolute silence. The smallest sound, the clink of a spoon against a cup, could unleash a storm. So she moved like mist, soft, unseen, unheard. She had perfected the art of quiet survival. Her body was a silent testament to her endurance. A fading bruise on her shoulder, a small scar near her temple, a constant ache in her ribs that never fully subsided. But the deepest wounds weren't visible. They were the bruises beneath the skin, the ones that had painstakingly rewritten her sense of self. They were the whispers in the dark, lies she started to believe, *you are weak. You are unworthy. You are alone. She didn't recognize the woman in the mirror anymore. The bright wonder in her eyes had been replaced by a dull emptiness, the look of someone who had forgotten how to dream. Her poetry, once her soul's expression, lay abandoned in a drawer. Her books, her companions, gathered dust. Her voice, once vibrant with laughter and questions, had dwindled to a timid whisper. One afternoon, while folding laundry, her fingers brushed against a piece of paper tucked into the pocket of an old skirt. It was a poem she had written months ago, in a different lifetime it seemed. It read, I am not the silence you demand, I am the storm you fear, the fire you cannot hold, the truth you cannot tame. She stared at the words, her hand trembling. They felt foreign, like a memory from a life she no longer lived. But deep in her chest, something stirred. A tiny flicker. A faint, stubborn pulse. That evening, Chinedu came home drunk. He'd been drinking more lately, claiming it helped him cope. His moods were violent pendulums. One moment, he'd be on his knees, weeping, begging her for forgiveness. The next, his eyes would flash with rage, and he'd accuse her of betrayals she couldn't even fathom. You think you're better than me? He slurred, his grip tightening around her wrist. No, she whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor. You think I don't see how you look at me? Like I'm broken? She stayed silent. She knew better than to answer. He shoved her, hard, against the wall. Her head connected sharply with the corner of a shelf. A starburst of pain, and then the coppery taste of blood. He froze, and then, as always, the tears came. I didn't mean to, he sobbed, his body collapsing. You know I love you. You know I'd die without you. She lay on the floor, dazed, watching his performance of remorse. And in that moment, something inside her finally broke. Not like glass, shattering into 1,000 sharp pieces. It was more like a rope, frayed and worn thin over time, finally snapping under unbearable strain. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood up, walked to the bathroom, and calmly cleaned the blood from her lip. That night, she didn't sleep in their bed. She curled up on the couch, clutching that old poem like a lifeline. The next morning, her voice shaking, she called a mocker. Her cousin hadn't heard from her in months. Oluchi had cut herself off, telling herself it was to protect Chinedu's fragile heart. But the truth was, she was drowning in shame. Oluchi, a mocker's voice cracked with a mix of shock and concern. Is that you? I need help, Oluchi whispered, the words barely audible. A mocker was there within the hour. She didn't bombard her with questions. She just wrapped her arms around Oluchi, holding her so tightly it felt like she was trying to stitch her broken pieces back together. They packed a small bag with just the essentials, a few clothes, her journal, her ID. Chinedu was still passed out in the bedroom. Oluchi left a simple note on the table, I'm leaving. I need to find myself again. Please don't follow me. Asterisk as they walked out the door, she didn't look back. Amoka's apartment felt like a sanctuary. It was small and cluttered, but it was brimming with life. The walls were covered in photos of family, vacations, and silly selfies. Oluchi stared at them, marveling at how joy could be so ordinary, so accessible to others. The first few days were a blur. She slept. She ate in silence. She sat by the window, watching a world that seemed to be moving on without her. Amoka didn't push. She just cooked jollof rice, played gospel music softly in the background, and left the door to Oluchi's room open, a silent invitation. Slowly, like a frozen river in spring, Oluchi began to thaw. She started writing again, just tentative lines and shaky verses at first. She took walks in the park, sitting under the trees and watching children play. She started therapy at a local women's center. Her therapist, a kind but firm woman named Mrs. Bissy, gave her a new mantra. "You are not what happened to you," she said. "You are what you choose to become." Oluchi wept the first time she heard that, because for the first time she had a choice, but she had no idea what to choose. One afternoon, she found herself at a modest school near Gaki. The paint was peeling, and the classrooms were noisy, but the children's eyes were bright with curiosity. She watched a young teacher captivating them with a story about courage. Something stirred in her again. She approached the principal and asked if they needed volunteers. "We always do," the principal replied with a warm smile. She began teaching reading and writing twice a week. The children affectionately called her Auntie O. They loved her poems and soon started writing their own. One little girl, Ada, wrote a poem that read, "My auntie says I am strong. Like the sun. Like the wind. Like the truth." Oluchi cried when she read it. Because for the first time, she was beginning to believe it herself. Of course, Chinedu called. She didn't answer. He sent a barrage of texts begging, threatening, apologizing, and then begging again. She blocked his number. He even showed up at Amoka's apartment once, shouting in the hallway until Amoka called the police. He was gone by the time they arrived. With Amoka's support, Oluchi filed for a restraining order. The process was slow and frustrating, but she persisted. She was learning that healing wasn't just an emotional journey, it was a legal and physical one, too. She joined a support group at the Women's Center. She shared her story and listened as other women shared theirs. They cried together, they laughed together, and they held space for each other's pain. One day, a woman in the group said, "We are not victims. We are survivors." Oluchi nodded, a profound sense of agreement washing over her. She was finally starting to feel like one. Months passed. The bruises faded, and the light returned to her eyes. Her laughter, once a distant memory, now came easily. She got a part-time job at the school, enough to afford her own small flat near Jabi. It had a little balcony where she grew plants and a desk right by the window. Every morning, she wrote. Her poems were different now. They still touched on pain, but they were about rebirth, resilience, and hope. One of them read, "I am the echo of my own voice, the rhythm of my own heart, the light that refused to die." She eventually gathered her poems and published a small chapbook. It sold modestly, but the reviews were deeply moving. One reader wrote to her, "This book saved me." Reading those words, Oluchi smiled. Because maybe, just maybe, in saving herself, she had created a light for others to find their way out of the dark, too. If you or someone you know is experiencing a similar situation, please know that you are not alone and help is available. There are resources and people ready to support you. Reaching out is a sign of incredible strength. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this space with me. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing for more content. Take care.